This podcast is made possible in part by the Kent County Medical Society Alliance.
Welcome to the Be Nice podcast, where we are going to have open conversations to help us recognize, understand, and take action when it comes to mental illness and suicide prevention. I'm Christy Buck, your host. Once again, we are here to understand and learn the Be Nice action plan, which is to notice, invite, challenge, and empower, working to educate our mental health communities and advocates and people who are struggling with mental health disorders who do not know where to get help and treatment. Our guest for this episode is a good friend of mine, Madi Klariter, who will be sharing more about specifically substance use disorder, her journey, and where she has found hope and recovery. So again, we always start off our podcast with busting a myth. Today's mental health myth that we are going to bust is people with addiction just need more willpower to quit. We must know and we must understand that mental health disorders in combination with substance use disorders are blocking brain pathways. We know that oftentimes people turn to alcohol or other substances to combat their mental health disorder, when in fact it can lead to feeling, we'll just say it, feeling worse. Changes that we may be looking for and we want to understand, Madi is going to help us to open up this conversation that always needs to be had. And what we know also is conversations can be very, very difficult when you want to start a conversation about mental health disorders, and in particular today, how to have a conversation about substance use disorders. So welcome, Madi. I've known Madi for quite a long time. Since she was in, I'm going to say, elementary school. Watched her growing up. I know her family very well, play trivia with her parents every Wednesday. And so I've watched it, but I want to talk to Madi a little bit about what led you where you are right now today.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I always like to start my story with, I grew up in a really great household. You know, I had a really great upbringing. I grew up in a neighborhood with a bunch of kids. I get along with my parents and my brother, and you know, it was just really perfect. And so I never thought that this would be something that I would go through. I found out later, probably when I was about 16, that my grandma, my dad's mom, struggled with addiction. She was sober for 23 years before she passed away. So when she passed, I had so many women come up to me at her funeral and say, "Your grandma saved my life." And it was just mind blowing to me, like, what did she save these people from? And so it wasn't really something that was talked about until she was gone. So it wasn't something that was ever really on my mind. But I started drinking in, I'd say, late high school, pretty normally. And then in college, I was always the girl that blacked out. I don't have a stop button in my brain. So when I left home for the first time, that's when it really ramped up. I went to law school in North Carolina, and I started drinking every night. And then I started drinking in the mornings, and then I started drinking at school. And I ended up dropping out and moving back home to my childhood bedroom, which was embarrassing, you know. And it got really bad. I had a lot of health issues from it. I was in and out of the hospital. I was in 2 comas on ventilators each time. And I had one of those instances, the doctor said the highest BAC of any woman they had seen come into the ER and still live. So
Miracle.
Yes, seriously.
Absolutely. You had a lot of angels
Yes.
right there with you, including your
absolutely.
grandmother, I'm thinking, for sure.
Definitely.
Madi, were you able to notice within yourself that you were abusing more than what a typical person would be doing? Did you notice that within yourself?
Eventually I did. I think it's hard for younger people, especially because, you know, you're in college or you're in grad school or all of these things where you just think everyone does this, you know. I see my friends going to the bar on a Wednesday. Why is that abnormal for me? But what really kind of changed it in my brain was I was not even able to go out to the bar on a Wednesday because I was too drunk by the time my friends were going. So I was drinking by myself every night, not even able to make it out to those fun things anymore, even when they did involve drinking, because that's what I wanted to do all the time.
Do you think your friends noticed, or was that just something that's just as we're going through college, many of us are just partying a little bit more. Do you think they noticed?
I think they did. I was especially bad. I think it was really one of those things where they would see me and they would say, there was nothing behind my eyes. Like, I would say something and they would be like, there's no way she's going to remember any of this tomorrow. And when that's happening every time they see me, that's, concerning. And I had so many physical symptoms too. I was always sweating and I was always just shaky and, so many things that I think people maybe don't want to look too close because it's uncomfortable. And how do you bring that up to somebody, especially when you're, in your early 20s? But I definitely think it was noticeable.
Okay. I think that you hit the nail on the head with where we're going right now, and that's that invite step in the Be Nice action plan. And I think you did mention, like, people are uncomfortable saying things. How do you think, what's the best way to approach, and especially maybe for the first time when we're trying to approach someone that we're worried and concerned about, that maybe they are drinking too much or spending more time at bars or spending more time around friends where you can be around alcohol more often? How do we start those?
I think that framing it in a different way than you maybe would originally think. Like, I think that to come out and ask somebody like, hey, are you an alcoholic, is really scary. Like, I think that that's there still is a lot of stigma around that word. And it's a hard stop for a lot of people. Well, if I'm an alcoholic, I have to stop drinking or I have to change my way of life. And I don't think that a lot of people are ready to do that or think about that right away. So I think asking somebody, like, I've noticed these things. How are you doing? Like, is there something going on? Is there anything I can help with? Is there anything that you want to look into, rather than accusing?
That's exactly what I wanted to get to also, because when we are instructing, and it's so interesting when you look at when does it become disabling to the individual? When does it really become a disorder? And what we teach is that when it's interrupting someone going to work or going to school, when it's interrupting their ability to carry out daily activities, and when it's interrupting their ability to carry on these engaging relationships that they typically have, that's the first clue to start the conversation. And that would be early, because oftentimes we can see those symptoms. And I know that so often, hopefully people are listening today that maybe you're parents of high school students. And when they do go off to college, oftentimes that is their first time where they're really away from home. And do you feel like that was happening in your life around that time when you went to college, and suddenly, what do you think with the relationship with college and drinking?
Yeah, I think that had a part in it for sure. I knew people that drank a lot in college and then, still aced all their classes and got 4.0s and became doctors and just snapped out of it. And I think that there's something in some people's brains where they just don't stop doing that. So I truly think that I would have been an addict no matter what. At some point in my life, something, would have made me drink to the amount that I did, and it was just kind of a matter of time. So I think just keeping an eye on it. Like, I don't think that if you see somebody that's drinking more than normal in college, it's necessarily a huge issue, but like maybe it's something else. Maybe it's stress in college, maybe it's being lonely, maybe it's like feeling like you don't fit in or you can't keep up with your classwork. Like, so many things that I think drinking can be a stress relief for. But yeah, it can definitely also be addiction.
And you hit the nail on the head a moment ago with talking about your grandma, who went on to be a champion in her community for substance use disorder. And that is the fact that 50% of those who have a predisposition with a relative who struggled with substance use or this alcohol use disorder go on to also struggle. So did you did you know that during high school? And I think that that's probably one thing too, Maddie, that you're helping us with, is to create that knowledge base for parents right now that might be listening.
I didn't know until she passed away when I was 16. And it still wasn't something we really talked about. I knew at that point. But growing up, I never saw her with a drink, and I never thought anything of it. And she'd have all these Christmas parties with all these women and make homemade ornaments for the Christmas parties, and I didn't realize that they were for women that she knew through sobriety. So I really do wish that I would have talked to her more, or talked about it more when she was still living, because there's so many things that I would ask her about her journey with sobriety. So I think that, like I've said a few times, like, there is still that stigma, but the amount of good that it can do to talk about those things is huge.
So going on and talking about the next step in the action plan, and that is challenge. So obviously we know that it's challenging in general. There's so much stigma that goes with this, and so much that you don't want to be labeled. And you did mention that the label that we really don't want to use, and that is an alcoholic, because that is truly labeling someone that we don't know if they're going to be diagnosed with substance use disorder, alcohol use disorder. Bottom line is the first step is to help get that person treatment and help. So what was the biggest challenge to you to go access help, to go be that person to take that first step? Did you do it on your own? Were you forced into that? Was it something that you were making the decisions for? You had other people making your decisions?
I was not given a choice the first time I went into rehab. My parents basically said, this is it, like, you can do this, or you can go to Forest View and stay in a psychiatric hospital. Like, there are so many ways that we're willing to help you, but you have to get help. So I had gone to Forest View first because I wasn't thinking that it was anything to do with alcohol. I thought that drinking was a way for me to cope with some sort of other, mental illness. And so I went, and they didn't even really, they asked me a little about my drinking, but I lied, and so I left there, and my parents said, you can either do that again, or you can go to rehab, because we've noticed a lot of drinking. And it wasn't something that I could hide anymore. I was living in their house, And so I went to Sanford House in Grand Rapids, and it was a wonderful place, a wonderful experience. But I wasn't ready to be done yet. So I got out, and my parents called the police on me because I started drinking again. And I went to jail for a weekend for a disturbing the peace charge. And went immediately, they picked me up from jail, brought me out to breakfast, and brought me back to Sanford House. And that stuck for maybe a little bit, but it didn't stick for a long time. I ended up going to Salvation Army for a little bit. And then the thing that really got me to take it extremely seriously, not even the comas, not even the ventilators, not any of the health things that I had.
Yeah.
My parents went to a support group, and the support group said, cut her off. If she's not willing to do this, I know it's hard. I know you love her, but you're not doing her any favors by enabling her. And if you're giving her a warm place to stay and food, you're enabling her. And so they said, we're kicking you out, and they didn't let me stay in their house. And it took me, it was the middle of winter, I will always remember, and it took me about 3 hours, and I really thought, I'm going to sleep outside. No, it took 3 hours, and I said, okay, I'm ready to go. I'm ready to do this. And that time it stuck. I went to Minnesota to a place called The Retreat, and that was a 12-step program. It was a 12-step immersion program. So through the month, I went through all 12 steps, and it was amazing. It was great.
I'm remembering that now, driving out there. A lot of it happened, thinking back, because we were on that journey with your mom and dad, my husband Tim and I. It was during COVID. And I know after you had been arrested, that February, I think, right, you had, the probation was removed, you were all set to go, and you were still doing great. And I'm going to go look back because we had a huge rise in alcohol, substance use disorder during those periods of COVID. What happened to you? I remember what happened. And that was groups had been cut off, right? You couldn't go to your groups. Did that have a big effect on you and what was going on in your treatment?
Yeah, I think so. We started doing Zoom meetings, and those are helpful, but I think at the end of the day, the biggest thing for me with sobriety was like that human connection. I really found a group of people that, yeah, maybe they didn't have the day-to-day experience that I had. Everybody's a little different, but like that core feeling, and just you can say something that would totally shock, a coworker or someone like that, and people that I met, they're just saying to me, yeah, I get that. I felt that. So that was a really huge thing. And so the Zoom meetings are great. I think that they were better than doing nothing at all during COVID. And I think they were still really helpful for people that can't make it to physical meetings or, there's lots of different situations. But I do think that element of human connection being taken away, that, we're in the same room talking about this, that was a really big blow.
Yeah. Another thing you mentioned during that challenge, and I want to reiterate this one, is also sometimes folks that are struggling, it can appear that they are utilizing drugs and alcohol to be that coping mechanism for, again, for their depression or bipolar disorder, whatever they may struggle with. And I think that's a big challenge for people, is to look beyond that. And again, getting rid of the stigma that surrounds substance and alcohol use disorder and facing that head on, because there are different treatment methods for that. I know at that time you can't just be concentrating on the depression. You also have to start removing that. So let's move on to this biggest step, and this is where I just love it, is that empowerment piece. And that's where taking the power to take action. So you mentioned that a big piece happened when your parents basically said, we're done. You're going to go get help and treatment, and this is it. This is the last straw. We're not going to take you back in. So at that point, when you were basically houseless, we'll just put it that way, was that was your piece of empowerment piece at that point? And then what did you do then?
Yeah, definitely. I hadn't been taking it super seriously to that point. I didn't really think my life was going to be anything worth living if you took drinking out of it. And I didn't even want to be drinking anymore. That was the thing, but I didn't understand what my life looked like without it. So I went to that last rehab, and it was just one of those things that all of these things happened when I was there that I thought to myself, this is really where I'm supposed to be. Just lots of little things, but the thing that stands out to me the most that I still talk about this to this day is, like I said, my grandma had helped all of these women, and my grandma's passed, but those women, a lot of them are still around, and so there's part of the program where you have to talk about all these things in your life, and then you have to tell somebody else, and that's it's two separate parts. And so I had gotten done with one part, and it's really hard, you're just totaling up all these things in your life that make you feel really awful. And I went down to lunch before I had to tell somebody else about it, and I had letters on the mail table, and I hadn't asked for anyone to write to me, and so I went and I opened up the letters, and they were letters from women that my grandma had helped with advice from her, and hand-painted bookmarks, and just all of these amazing things that I didn't ask for any of it. And like for that moment, for them to come, it was incredible to me. So I still have all those letters and bookmarks and everything. I still read through them and keep in contact with those women. And so I think, just like those little things that kind of snowballed, I was like, this is really where I'm supposed to be. And it got better every day after I left.
I love that, because that empowerment piece goes both ways. And for now, you have empowered yourself to push forward to help others. Tell us how that's been.
That's been so great. Yeah, like I said, I got really involved with, a lot of young at heart, sober people with room to grow. And I got really plugged into that community. So I don't even really like camping, but I go on a few camping trips every year and help plan, a 200-person camping event every summer. And I cook the dinner for it a lot of the years, which is so fun.
Right.
I've got really into helping to plan some of the events. And now I'm on a committee that kind of oversees a big celebration that we have every year, which has been a really cool experience. So I got really involved in that, and it's changed my life. I've met so many people. I've met people where I can go to Florida and walk into a room at one of these events, and there will be a few people that I know. And that's just, it's so cool to me to know that my network is that big, and I've met so many incredible people who have changed their lives for the better.
I love it. And I've seen you, I'm a fan of yours on Instagram from watching you and your cupcakes that you were making to now having your job as a culinary artist. And that you're able to be places where there is alcohol. Where did you find that point where you could be there? I mean, does it happen right away, or when did you breach into that? Because it's amazing to me that you go to concerts. You don't shy away from going to concerts. I saw it at the intersection, and I'm going, whoa, this is recovery.
Yeah, it definitely wasn't right away. I would say probably a year to a year and a half, I felt more comfortable. I ended up going back to school about a year and a half into my sobriety. And I went back for culinary school, and it's been so great. And while I was there, I took a table service class, and I thought I could be a server. So I started doing that. And after I did that for about a year, I was a bartender, which was so, wild to me but I was in a good space. I didn't feel shaky. I didn't feel like I, woke up and immediately had that desire to drink. I really don't think about it much at all anymore, which is so great. And so I think being open about it has been huge too. I told my bosses, everyone at work knew. So that was a really big piece for me. And then, I cook using alcohol at work. I don't keep it in my house, but I cook with it at work. But again, I tell everybody, and luckily I'm in a job that I'm able to talk about it. I think people are in jobs where it's looked down upon, and so it's like something that you can't really talk about, but I talk about it with everyone, and it's such a big problem in the hospitality industry too that I like to be open about it so people know they can reach out.
Yeah, and it's education. It's allowing people to know that it is connected with the brain, just like a mental health disorder, and oftentimes we're afraid to talk about things that our brains are in control of, and addiction is so much part of that the chemistry is a little different, and your chemistry from your brother's brain chemistry is totally different. And that's just a huge education piece, and I appreciate what you're doing and that you're willing to talk about this and being here today especially, and then going with me on Monday, and we did a little TV gig, so that was awesome too. On a final note, where do you see, I wanted to ask you again because I've been using the word recovery, do you see sobriety as being a different definition than recovery?
I do. I think, sobriety is stopping drinking, whereas I think recovery is changing all of these pieces in your life. Because I could stop drinking and not, work on anything else, and I would be a miserable person, you know? I like to describe it where I was in a tunnel when I first got sober, and I didn't see really any way out of it. Everything just seemed dark and, boring and dingy, and really by working on myself and my mental health outside of drinking, my relationships, I've repaired so many relationships. Working on all those things, I think, has pushed me into recovery because, my life, I've said it before, but if I had wished for a life when I got sober, the life that I have now is beyond what I would have wished for. I wouldn't have even known what to wish for. And so I feel super blessed that I'm living this life today.
I love it. Absolutely. I just want to thank you so much for being here today. I want to thank everybody for listening today. For more information about the work that we're doing at the Mental Health Foundation with the Be Nice Action Plan, you can go to our website at www.benice.org and connect with us if you would like more presentations or any information. Don't forget that if you know someone who is struggling and if you know someone who needs someone to talk to at any time of the day, the helpline 988 is there 24/7 for someone to have a conversation with. We know that oftentimes when someone dies by suicide, over 50% of the population who die by suicide were under the influence of drugs or alcohol at that time. So it's important we have that phone number. There's also a text line, 741-741. They can text NICE. They can text anything they want, but NICE would give attention to that. And then until the next time, be nice. It can save a life.
This podcast is made possible in part by the Kent County Medical Society Alliance.